Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little quieter, a time of silence, sacrifice and soup made from turnips. We're diving into what life was really like as a medieval monk. Forget the peaceful monastery gardens and wise scholarly debates Hollywood sold you. The truth, you probably wouldn't last a single prayer session. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1347. The good news, you're alive and devoted to God. The bad news, it's 2 a.m. and the bell is clanging for matins. Your bed is a thin straw mattress on a wooden plank. No pillow, no blanket, except a rough wool habit that doubles as your only clothing. There's no snooze button, no rolling over for 5 more minutes, and definitely no pretending you didn't hear the bell. The monastery operates on God's time, and God apparently doesn't believe in sleeping in. You stumble awake in complete darkness. There's no electricity, no gentle wake-up light, just the bone-chilling cold of a stone chamber and the relentless clanging of iron on bronze. Your cell is barely 6 feet by 4 feet, with walls thick enough to muffle screams but thin enough to let in every draft. The floor is packed dirt covered with rushes that haven't been changed in months. They smell like mold, mouse droppings, and the accumulated sweat of every monk who slept here before you. Your roommate situation is unique. You don't have one. Medieval monks practice strict isolation, especially at night. Your cell door doesn't lock from the inside, because privacy breeds sin, according to your abbot. Anyone could walk in at any time to check on your spiritual progress, or catch you in an act of forbidden comfort. The walls are decorated with exactly nothing. No personal items, no family photos, no books except the communal ones. Just bare stone, a wooden cross, and the faint scratch marks left by monks who came before you, counting days or perhaps scratching prayers into the rock with their fingernails. Getting out of bed is a spiritual exercise in suffering. The cold hits you like a physical slap. Your feet touch the frozen stone floor, and you immediately understand why so many monks develop permanent limps. Your habit is still damp from yesterday's washing, if it was washed at all. Medieval laundry happened sporadically, and personal hygiene was considered a dangerous vanity. You pull the coarse wool over your head, feeling it scratch against skin that's already raw from months of the same routine. Welcome to monastic life, where comfort is a sin, and suffering brings you closer to heaven. And this is just the first bell of 8 you'll hear today. It only gets harder from here. So you've dragged yourself from your stone-cold cell, and now you must stumble through darkness to the chapel, for matins, the first of 7 daily prayer services. There's no flashlight, no hallway lighting, just the memory of stone corridors you've walked hundreds of times, and the hope you don't trip over another sleepwalking brother. The monastery is a maze of identical passages, and in the darkness, every archway looks the same. You're not walking alone. 40 other monks are shuffling through the corridors like religious zombies, their bare feet slapping against stone, their breathing visible in the frigid air. No one speaks. The rule of Saint Benedict demands silence, and breaking it means punishment that ranges from extra fasting to public humiliation. You communicate through hand gestures and meaningful glances, a sign language developed over centuries of enforced quiet. The chapel is massive, cold, and echoing. Stone pillars stretch up into darkness that even the flickering candles can't penetrate. You take your assigned place on a wooden bench worn smooth by generations of monastic backsides. There's no cushion, no back support, just hard oak that will leave your tailbone aching for hours. The brother next to you smells like unwashed wool, garlic, and something else you don't want to identify. Matins lasts for 2 hours. 2 hours of standing, sitting, kneeling, and chanting in Latin. 2 hours of psalms that echo off stone walls and drift up into the darkness like the prayers of the dead. Your stomach is empty because you haven't eaten since yesterday's single meal. Your feet are numb from the cold. Your back aches from the wooden bench. And this is just the beginning of your day. The chanting is monotonous, hypnotic, and designed to break down your individual will. Your voice blends with 40 others until you can't hear yourself anymore. The abbot watches from his elevated seat, noting which monks seem less than perfectly devoted. His eyes miss nothing, and his memory is long. Every stumbled word, every stifled yawn, every moment of inattention gets recorded in his mental ledger of spiritual debt. When Matins finally ends, you don't go back to bed. You have exactly 1 hour before Lauds, the second prayer service of the day. 1 hour to sit in silence, to contemplate your sins, to prepare your soul for another day of service. You can't read because books are precious and controlled. You can't talk because silence is mandatory. You can't even scratch an itch without wondering if it's a sign of spiritual weakness. So you sit in the dark, listening to your stomach rumble, feeling your joints stiffen, and waiting for the next bell. Because in monastic life, waiting is a form of prayer, and prayer is the only escape from a routine designed to crush your earthly desires into holy submission. You survived the pre-dawn marathon of Matins, sat in contemplative silence for an hour, and now the bell rings again for Lauds, the morning praise service. The sky outside is still black, but somewhere beyond these stone walls, the world is pretending dawn might eventually come. You drag yourself back to the chapel, to the same wooden bench, for another hour of chanting, kneeling, and spiritual endurance. Lauds is followed by an hour of reading, except reading means sitting in the scriptorium with a manuscript written in Latin, by monks whose handwriting looks like angry spiders dipped in ink. You can't choose what to read. The abbot assigns texts based on what he thinks your soul needs, which usually means the most tedious theological treatises ever written, commentaries on commentaries of biblical verses, debates about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, and detailed explanations of why your every thought is probably sinful. The scriptorium is barely warmer than your cell. Your fingers are so cold you can barely turn the pages, and the parchment is stiff and brittle. The text is illuminated with beautiful gold and blue decorations, but you're not allowed to admire them. Appreciation of beauty is vanity. You're supposed to focus on the words, absorb their meaning, and let them transform your sinful heart into something worthy of heaven. Around you, other monks sit hunched over their assigned texts, their lips moving silently as they read. Some are copying manuscripts, their quill pens scratching endlessly across parchment. The sound is hypnotic and maddening, like mice eating their way through your sanity 1 letter at a time. The monk next to you has been copying the same passage from Augustine for 3 weeks because the abbot found a smudge and made him start over. Then the bell rings again. Prime, the third prayer service of the day. Back to the chapel, back to the wooden bench, back to Latin chants that echo in your empty stomach and aching bones. By now the sun has finally crawled above the horizon, sending weak light through stained glass windows. The colors are beautiful, but you're not supposed to notice. Beauty distracts from devotion. After prime comes chapter, a meeting where the abbot reads from the rule of Saint Benedict and assigns punishments for yesterday's infractions. Brother Marcus failed to wake up quickly enough for matins. 3 days of bread and water. Brother Thomas was caught smiling during psalms. A week of extra kitchen duty. Brother Francis looked out a window during reading time. Public confession and 20 lashes with a leather strap. You listen to each punishment and wonder what you did wrong yesterday that you haven't been caught for yet. In monastic life, sin is assumed. Perfect obedience is impossible. Punishment is inevitable. The only question is, when and how severe? Now it's finally time for breakfast, if you can call it that. A cup of weak ale, a chunk of bread so hard it could be used as a weapon, and if you're lucky, a thin gruel made from oats that taste like disappointment mixed with despair. Welcome to monastic cuisine, where flavor is vanity and hunger brings you closer to God. So you've survived the morning prayer marathon, and now you get to experience medieval monastic cuisine, which is designed to keep you alive while ensuring you never enjoy a single bite. The refectory, where meals are served, is a long stone hall with wooden tables scarred by centuries of knives and elbows. You sit on backless benches that guarantee your posture remains appropriately humble throughout the meal. There's no talking during meals. Instead, one monk stands at a pulpit and reads from religious texts while you eat. Today's entertainment is a detailed description of hell's torments, read in a monotone voice that somehow makes eternal damnation sound boring. You listen to graphic descriptions of sinners being boiled in oil, while you chew bread that feels like chewing leather, soaked in regret. The bread is the foundation of every meal, and it's nothing like modern bread. It's made from whatever grain the monastery could afford, often barley or rye, bulked up with beans, peas, or sawdust when times are hard. The loaves are dense, dark, and so hard that monks regularly break teeth trying to eat them. You learn to soak each bite in ale or thin soup until it softens enough to swallow without injury. Meat is forbidden except for the sick and dying, which means your protein comes from eggs, when the chickens are laying, and fish, when the monastery pond isn't frozen solid. The fish is usually small, bony, and tastes like mud, because that's essentially what it lived in. The eggs are often half rotten, because refrigeration hasn't been invented, and chickens don't lay on schedule. Most meals center around pottage, a thick soup made from whatever vegetables the monastery garden produced, supplemented with herbs that grow wild around the walls. Onions, leeks, cabbage, turnips, and beans simmer together in iron pots that haven't been properly cleaned since the monastery was founded. The same pot serves meal after meal, building up layers of flavor that could charitably be called complex and honestly described as nauseating. Ale is your primary beverage because water is dangerous. The monastery well might be contaminated, and boiling water for tea isn't practical for 40 monks 3 times a day. So you drink weak ale at breakfast, stronger ale at dinner, and occasionally wine on feast days. By the end of most days, a slight buzz is the only thing standing between you and a complete spiritual breakdown. Portions are deliberately small, gluttony is a sin, and hunger keeps the mind focused on spiritual rather than earthly matters. You leave every meal slightly unsatisfied, your stomach still grumbling, your body slowly consuming itself in service to God. Weight loss isn't a goal, it's an inevitable result of monastic dining. And if you complain, even silently, if your face shows dissatisfaction with God's provision, you'll find yourself eating nothing but bread and water for a week while the other monks enjoy their usual feast of turnip soup and disappointment. Now that you've choked down your meager breakfast and listened to detailed descriptions of eternal torment, it's time for the day's work. Because contrary to popular belief, medieval monks didn't spend all day in quiet contemplation. They spent most of it in back-breaking labor that would make a construction worker weep. The monastery is a self-sufficient community, which means everything needed for survival must be produced within its walls. Food, clothing, tools, books, medicine, and building materials all require constant work by monks whose spiritual duties are squeezed between shifts of manual labor that never end. Your work assignment depends on your skills, your physical capacity, and the abbot's opinion of your spiritual progress. If you're assigned to the fields, congratulations. You get to spend 12 hours a day bent over crops with tools that would have been primitive in ancient Rome. The monastery plough is pulled by oxen when they're healthy, and by monks when they're not. You dig irrigation ditches with wooden shovels, pull weeds by hand, and harvest grain with a sickle that requires you to cut each stalk individually, while bent double under the sun. The monastery garden provides vegetables for the community, but medieval agriculture is a constant battle against soil depletion, plant diseases, and weather that seems personally vindictive. You plant seeds saved from last year's harvest and pray they don't rot in the ground. You water by hand from buckets carried from the well. You fertilize with manure from the monastery animals, spreading it by hand and breathing through your mouth to avoid the smell. Kitchen duty means rising even earlier to prepare meals for 40 hungry monks. You haul water from the well, build fires from scratch, and cook in iron pots heavy enough to crush your foot if you drop them. The kitchen is either freezing cold or blazing hot, depending on the season and whether the fire decides to cooperate. You pluck chickens, gut fish, and scrub pots with sand and ash, because soap is a luxury the monastery can't afford. The scriptorium offers intellectual work, but it's no less demanding. Copying manuscripts requires perfect handwriting, absolute accuracy, and the patience of a saint, because one mistake means starting over. The ink is made from oak galls, iron, and vinegar, mixed fresh each day and rationed carefully. Parchment is expensive, so every letter must be perfect. You spend hours hunched over a writing desk, your hand cramping, your eyes straining in candlelight that flickers with every draft. Building maintenance never ends in a structure made of stone, wood and hope. The roof leaks, the walls crack, and the floors settle in ways that create new drafts and puddles. You mix mortar by hand, carry stones that weigh more than you do, and climb scaffolding made from tree branches lashed together with rope. Safety regulations don't exist, and accidents are considered God's will. Your workday begins after the bread is marginally softer than the morning's offering, but only because it's been sitting in the kitchen absorbing moisture and kitchen odors for several hours. You tear it into pieces and use it to soak up the liquid from your pottage, creating a mixture that combines the worst aspects of both ingredients into something greater than the sum of its disappointing parts. If you're lucky, there might be cheese made from the monastery's goats. It's sharp, salty, and riddled with holes that could be air pockets or evidence of creatures you don't want to think about. The cheese is rationed carefully, with each monk receiving a portion small enough to disappear in 2 bites. You learn to make it last by taking microscopic nibbles while trying to convince yourself you're enjoying a delicacy. The ale served at dinner is stronger than the breakfast version, but that's not saying much. It's cloudy, slightly sour, and contains mysterious particles that float like tiny warnings at what happens to grain when it's stored too long in damp conditions. You drink it anyway because dehydration is worse than questionable brewing techniques. Conversation is forbidden, but the silence is filled with the sounds of digestion, shifting robes, and the occasional cough that echoes off stone walls like a gunshot. You become intimately familiar with the eating habits of your brothers, learning to identify each monk by the sound of his chewing, the rhythm of his breathing, and the particular way he struggles with especially tough pieces of bread. The meal ends when the reader finishes his chapter, not when you've had enough to eat. You leave the table still hungry, your stomach partially filled but far from satisfied. This is intentional. Monks are supposed to rise from meals thinking of God, not drowsing from overindulgence. And if you're caught hoarding food, sneaking extra portions, or showing too much interest in the taste of your meals, you'll find yourself fasting while your brothers enjoy their usual banquet of controlled portions and spiritual enlightenment. The afternoon brings more work, more prayer, and the growing realization that monastic life is designed to exhaust every part of your being except your soul, which is supposed to grow stronger as your body grows weaker. After dinner comes none, the afternoon prayer service, followed by more work until Vespers, the evening prayer. The routine never varies, never offers relief, never acknowledges that human beings might need rest, recreation, or simple pleasure. By late afternoon, your body is running on spiritual determination and weak ale, while your mind cycles through the same Latin phrases you've been chanting since before dawn. The work assignments continue regardless of weather, season, or personal capacity. If you're in the fields, you're harvesting in blazing sun or ploughing in freezing rain. If you're in the kitchen, you're standing over fires that make the room unbearably hot, while the stone walls ensure it's still cold everywhere else. If you're copying manuscripts, you're straining your eyes in light that grows dimmer as winter approaches, trying to form perfect letters while your fingers shake from cold and fatigue. The monastery operates on the principle that idle hands are the devil's workshop, so there's always more work available than there are hours to complete it. Monks work until they collapse, pray until their voices give out, and sleep just long enough to survive until the next bell rings. The schedule is designed to break down individual will and replace it with communal devotion, but mostly it just breaks down individuals. Your afternoon work shift is interrupted by Vespers, the evening prayer service that marks the transition from day to night. The chapel is darker now, lit only by candles that cast dancing shadows on stone walls worn smooth by centuries of prayer. You take your place on the familiar wooden bench and join 40 other voices in chants that echo off cold stone and disappear into darkness above. Vespers is longer than the afternoon services, but shorter than matins, a compromise between spiritual necessity and human endurance. Your voice blends with your brothers in harmonies that would be beautiful if you had any energy left to appreciate beauty. Instead, you chant mechanically, your mind focused on the pain in your knees, the emptiness in your stomach, and the knowledge that this day is almost over, but tomorrow will bring exactly the same routine. The Psalms wash over you like waves of exhaustion, each verse a step closer to the end of another day in service to God. You stand, sit, and kneel according to centuries of tradition, your body moving through motions perfected by generations of monks who also wondered if this was really what God wanted from human lives. When Vespers finally ends, you have a few hours before Compline, the final prayer service of the day. These hours are supposed to be spent in quiet reflection, personal prayer, or reading devotional texts. In reality, they're spent trying to stay awake long enough to get through the last service before you can collapse onto your straw mattress and lose consciousness until the next bell rings. The monastery after Vespers is a place of deep silence, broken only by the shuffle of bare feet on stone floors and the distant sound of wind through gaps in ancient masonry. You might sit in your cell, trying to read by candlelight that flickers and dies without warning. You might walk the cloisters, a covered walkway around a central courtyard where other monks pace in silent meditation, or simply try to stretch muscles that have been cramped all day. This is your free time, such as it is. Free to think about God, free to examine your sins, free to prepare your soul for another day of identical routine. You're not free to complain, to question, to seek entertainment, or to acknowledge that you're a human being with needs that extend beyond spiritual salvation. The hours before Compline drag by, with the weight of accumulated exhaustion. You've been awake for nearly 20 hours, working and praying in equal measure, sustained by meager food and the promise of eternal reward. Your body aches, your mind is foggy, and your spirit is supposed to be soaring toward heaven, but feels more like it's crawling toward bed. Soon the bell will ring again, calling you to the final prayer service of the day. And after that, you'll have exactly 6 hours to sleep before it all begins again. The final bell of the day rings for Compline, the last prayer service before you're allowed to sleep. Your feet carry you to the chapel one more time, to the wooden bench that knows the shape of your bones, for the last hour of chanting before you can escape into unconsciousness. Compline is shorter than the other services, a mercy that feels almost generous after 20 hours of scheduled devotion. The prayers focus on protection through the night, on peaceful sleep, and on preparation for death that might come before morning. Medieval monks lived with the constant awareness that each day might be their last, not from philosophical contemplation, but from practical experience. Disease, accident, and simple exhaustion claimed monks regularly, and each night's sleep was a small rehearsal for eternal rest. You chant the familiar words in Latin, your voice hoarse from a day of prayer and work. The psalms echo off stone walls and disappear into darkness that seems to swallow sound and light equally. Candles flicker in draughts that find their way through ancient masonry, casting shadows that dance like prayers made visible. When Compline ends, the great silence begins. From now until matins, no monk is allowed to speak except in cases of absolute emergency. The monastery becomes a place of deep quiet, broken only by the sounds of men trying to move silently through stone corridors in total darkness. You feel your way back to your cell, your hands trailing along walls worn smooth by generations of monks navigating the same path. Your cell waits exactly as you left it this morning, because you own nothing that could be disturbed. The straw mattress on its wooden plank, the rough wool habit you'll wear again tomorrow, the wooden cross on the wall that you can't see in the darkness but know is there. You collapse onto the mattress without undressing, because the habit serves as pajamas, day clothes and shroud if necessary. The straw crackles under your weight and pokes through the thin fabric that barely qualifies as a mattress cover. The wool habit is damp from sweat, kitchen steam, and the general humidity that pervades stone buildings without proper heating. You pull it closer anyway, because it's the only warmth available, and close your eyes against darkness so complete, it makes no difference whether they're open or closed. Sleep comes quickly when your body has been pushed past endurance. You don't dream of comfort, pleasure, or escape. You don't dream at all. Sleep is simply the absence of consciousness, a temporary death that ends too soon when the bell rings again for matins. And tomorrow will be identical to today. The same prayers, the same work, the same meals, the same silence, the same exhaustion, day after day, year after year, until death provides the only permanent escape from a routine designed to transform human beings into something closer to angels, but usually just wearing them down to spiritual shadows of their former selves. This is monastic life, not the peaceful contemplation of popular imagination, but a grinding discipline that breaks bodies and minds in service to souls that may or may not be getting closer to God. You wanted to serve the divine, but mostly you're serving time in a stone prison, where the warden is supposedly benevolent, but the conditions would make a secular jail seem luxurious. Welcome to medieval monasticism, where suffering is salvation, and tomorrow's bell is already waiting to ring. You've survived your first day as a medieval monk, but don't celebrate yet, because tomorrow brings the same routine, and the day after that, and every day for the rest of your natural life, or until you break under the pressure and either die or get expelled for spiritual inadequacy. Most monks don't choose to leave, they simply wear away like water over stone, gradually losing everything that made them individuals until only the routine remains. The life you've just experienced isn't sustainable for normal human beings. It's designed to push monks beyond normal human limitations, to create a kind of living martyrdom where suffering becomes a daily offering to God. Some monks thrive under this pressure, finding genuine spiritual fulfillment in the complete surrender of personal will. Others endure it because they have no choice, having sworn vows that bind them legally and spiritually to the monastery until death. But most monks simply survive, day by day, prayer by prayer, meal by meal, until the routine becomes their entire identity. They stop thinking about the outside world, stop remembering what pleasure feels like, stop imaging any life except the one bounded by stone walls and regulated by bells. They become living ghosts, technically alive, but reduced to basic functions of prayer, work, eat, sleep, repeat. The monastery archives are filled with records of monks who died young from exhaustion, malnutrition, or simple despair. Others lived into old age but aged rapidly under the constant stress of physical and spiritual demands that never decrease. The few who seemed to flourish often did so by developing a kind of spiritual detachment that borders on madness, finding joy in suffering and peace in complete submission. Modern people romanticize medieval monasticism as a simpler, more spiritual way of life. They imagine peaceful gardens, wise teachers, and quiet contemplation. They don't imagine the reality of chronic hunger, physical exhaustion, and psychological pressure that would break most contemporary individuals within weeks. The monks who created beautiful illuminated manuscripts and preserved classical learning did so despite their living conditions, not because of them. So how's your day been as a medieval monk? You've prayed for 8 hours, worked for 10 hours, eaten 2 meals that barely qualify as food, and slept on a straw mattress in a stone cell colder than most modern refrigerators. You've surrendered every comfort, every pleasure, every personal choice in service to a God who may or may not appreciate the sacrifice. Still dreaming of the monastic life? Think again. That romanticized version of medieval spirituality, with its wise abbots, beautiful manuscripts, and peaceful contemplation, is a myth polished by centuries of distance and wishful thinking. In truth, the monastic world was harsh, unforgiving, and designed to break human beings down into something that might please God, but usually just created suffering. The simple life wasn't simple, it was relentless. Everything took longer, hurt more, and came with spiritual consequences. From prayer to work to sleep, every moment was regulated, observed, and judged. Life was survival disguised as salvation, discipline presented as devotion. But here's the remarkable part. Through all of this suffering, through the cold cells and meager meals and endless routine, some monks still found meaning. Not because life was easy, but because humans are stubborn like that. Even in the darkest chapters of discipline, they made space for transcendence. They copied beautiful books, preserved ancient wisdom, and occasionally touched something that might have been the divine. So tonight, when you slip into your comfortable bed with central heating, unlimited food, and the freedom to sleep as long as you want, maybe say a quiet thank you. Thank the modern world for recognizing that human beings need more than survival, and thank those medieval monks who endured stone cells and turnip soup so you wouldn't have to. Their sacrifice wasn't just spiritual, it was profoundly, painfully human, and in remembering their struggle, we might find something closer to the divine than they ever did in their cold stone cells.